What is your legacy? What impact are you having in your industry, in the company that you work for, in your community, in in this life? What is the impact that you're leaving? And what we're going to dig into on the podcast today is how the answer to that question can actually drive some really powerful marketing material. Stay tuned. Giving architects and landscape architects the tools and strategies to be seen, heard, and valued in the marketplace, and telling the stories of leaders building thriving design firms and attracting their ideal clients. This is From Architecture to Profitecture. I'm your host, Jay Krakowski. Let's get started. Fellow and future Profitex, hello, how are you? Welcome to this week's show that I have titled Less Legend and More Legacy. I'll explain what I mean by that. I was kind of inspired to write today's show based on the passing of Eddie Van Halen, who was actually kind of influential in my youth. Though I'm not a guitarist, I'm a drummer, but his records are part of my catalog, part of my library. They don't come out that often, but when they do, it brings back really strong memories, really great memories. And when I'm thinking about Eddie, you're thinking about that kind of squinty smile he always had on stage, and just the insane stuff he could do with the guitar from a really early age. That's the man. That's the legend, as they say. The legacy that he's left behind is obviously his body of work, all those recordings. And for many of us, the body of work that we're leaving behind are physical spaces and physical structures that people inhabit, that people work in, that people move through, that people recreate in. That's part of our impact, but that's not the whole impact that we necessarily have, certainly in this life, and maybe not in your career or in your industry too. So while books have been and will continue to be written about Eddie Van Halen and his recordings, his catalog will be, it's probably played on, I don't know how many YouTube channels that I saw pop up in my feed, at all these tributes, and on radio stations and other podcasts and what have you. Not all of us at the end of the day are going to have books written about us. We need to be writing our own story. And I want to take you through an exercise in starting to think about that story in terms of the big picture. Maybe not just the project you're working on, but potentially your career, potentially your life. No, I'm not trying to get morbid here, guys. But it's an exercise that I went through just a few weeks ago in a coaching program that I'm in, and it's actually it gave me insights into what I want to do, both with this with this podcast, and yes with the marketing coaching that I'm developing, but also in my design work, also in my family life, and in my community. And it's a real quick exercise. It's just writing a letter. It's writing a letter, but you are 85 years old. So you're essentially writing a letter to yourself as you are sitting there at 85 years old, hopefully retired, hopefully still not working to pay the bills here. But there's a few questions, a few prompts that we can go through. What did you build? And yes, you could list maybe your most notable projects, but also who did you impact with that work? What kind of communities, what kind of businesses did you make better? What kind of families did you help in doing any residential work? Maybe what are your children doing now, if you have children, if your future self has children? Your coworkers, did you have business partners? What are they doing? What were they able to accomplish through your work and through your time here? What's the legacy that you built? Not just the physical places and spaces, but what is the legacy that you built? And I want you to write this letter to yourself. It's a little weird, I know. You have to sit with it for a minute or three. Write it as if it's already accomplished. It's past tense. You are out there in your rocking chair on the porch, as they say, sipping an iced tea and thinking about the 85 years prior. But think of it, write this out in the present tense. What is your legacy? And I would ask you, does your legacy necessarily include all those quote unquote bread and butter jobs that we all have in running design firms to to pay the bills and to generate revenue. I'm not going to say that those are not important, because we need to keep the lights on. We need to keep promoting ourselves and paying employees and staff if we have them. But are those truly part of your legacy, or is there something stronger? Is there something outside the fields of architecture and landscape architecture that you want to have had accomplished? And that might be affecting different communities for the better through your work. It may be more educational. That's teaching or introducing youth to the profession. What are those parts of your legacy? Again, write it in the present tense. And here's the big thing. You can change it. Just like all of our marketing materials, you can change it. So don't get hung up on writing the perfect letter to yourself from the future, as they say, but don't worry about getting it perfect. And if you miss things, if you think that you miss things, it's okay, because you can always add to it. You can always change it, just as we do our marketing materials. But what I said before about bread and butter jobs, what I hope this will drive home for you is that thinking with the end in mind, the end of our career, the end of our lives. Yes, I know. I'm not trying to be morbid, but seriously, thinking with that end in mind, it's providing me such clarity on how I want to continue this podcast, how I want to build out that coaching program, the kind of clients that I want to attract for my design firm. And it can really help you to structure, if you haven't done it yet, or if you're in the midst of a reboot, so to speak, of your website and of your marketing material, thinking with the end in mind I think can help you break free from that marketing that's stale, that's having a lot of design professionals feel like they are a commodity, because they're listing their services. They're not telling a story. They're not talking about the impact or movement that they want to create in their design work. Because as they say, when you try to appeal to everyone, you actually end up appealing to nobody. And that's sort of along the lines of niching down. But if you are starting to rework or to develop your marketing messages or your email sales funnel or what have you, your social media presence, think about the impact that you want to have. Think about the impact that your firm or that your design work wants to have out there. Not just your name and your signature on the bottom of the drawing, and not just the brick and concrete and trees and shrubs that we put into the ground and build for our clients and build for the end user, for other people. But how are their lives made better? How did you help people in your time as an architect, as a landscape architect, as a human being here? So a little exercise I wanted to leave you with. And if you're not a Van Halen fan, that's okay. You can still listen. I'll still be your friend. But it was kind of one of those moments from childhood, kind of like when Ronald Reagan passed a number of years ago. It's one of those things that's so poignant in growing up, in childhood, and first discovering music for me with Eddie Van Halen, that makes you take a step back. And it's not just about the guy. It's not just about being a Corbusier or a Michael van Valkenburg or a Bjarke Ingels. It's about the impact that they had on the profession or the industry or their communities. And I want you to take advantage of this kind of reflection into the future, if you will. And let's work together to create those stories and build that legacy right now, so that when someone comes across your design firm on social media, on a Google search, through a past client recommendation, that your legacy is built out and they are enrolled into it. They want to be a part of your legacy. That's some powerful stuff right there. So any questions on that? I'd love to talk to you further. Send me a direct message, Jake Krakowski, on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. And if you've been listening to the show for any length of time, I'd love to have a review from you on Apple Podcasts. It helps this fledgling podcast start to break into the ranks of architecture and design podcasts out there in the world. So thanks so much for listening. And until next week, make it a great week, because our success is inevitable. Take care. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you stay up to date with future episodes. Connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn at Jake Krakowski. And for show notes and much more, visit prophetecturebydesign.com/podcast.